I'm always thankful whenever I see that someone shared my videos. You know, I spend a lot of time working on these videos. I pretty much devote a large portion of my life to video making, frankly because I want to be able to do this professionally at some point. I know it's a far-fetched dream, but, may as well work towards it. Work for the life you want, not the life you have. But I'm always, very thankful whenever I see people share my videos. Sometimes I've seen my videos posted on Reddit or on forums. And I always... There's an easy way to see how your videos have been shared. If you have this Google Chrome extension called vidIQ, it lets you see the tags of different YouTube videos and stuff, but it also lets you see where those YouTube videos have been shared. In fact, there's a tab on that extension that's just for tweets, like if your video has been linked in a tweet or a retweet, so you know if someone shared your video on Twitter, or the video in question on Twitter, not just your video, but I typically only look at the tweets from my own videos just because what is going on outside? I don't know, there's a loud squeaking noise outside. That's just gonna have to be there. That's wonderful. But oh god, that's just completely distracting me. Anyway, sometimes I periodically check to see if my videos have been tweeted out by anybody. So imagine my surprise while I'm looking through some of my videos and I come across my 13 unpopular Transformers video, Transformers opinion video. And I click on the tab to see who's tweeted it out, and I see that someone's tweeted it out. I'm like, okay, let's click on this. Let's see who tweeted me out, what they're saying here. And I click it, and it's a dude whose Twitter profile I recognize. It's this dude with some sort of Optimus Primal profile picture. And I've noticed this dude before because he'll pop up in my mentions and replies every now and then. And it's always weird to me because he'll ask questions or he'll criticize some stuff in my videos. And he'll like ask for further questions. He gave me this weird stuff on my Optimus Primal audiobook thing that I'll get into. But yeah, he's always there, but he doesn't follow me. So I'm like, how did you get here? First of all, why are you a recurring person in my notifications when you don't even follow me? Like, how's that supposed to work? Also, why don't you follow me? Because I'm under the impression that you're some sort of viewer, some sort of fan. Probably best if you follow me. I feel like I am wasting my time when I reply to someone like him, because like I appreciate those who follow me. I appreciate my fans. I'm doing air quotes around fans. I've talked about how I've had problems with that term before, but we're just going to use it here just for the sake of simplicity. I will take the time to reply to fans and stuff like that, but this is a dude who's demanding a bit of my time, who isn't even following me on Twitter. So I don't even know where he comes from, so I don't know if I'm just wasting my breath trying to talk to him, if I'm ever going to get through to him, but frankly, he's been fairly annoying rather than anything else. There's an audiobook of Cuckoo Universe Spotlight Optimus Primal, which is part of my Cuckoo Universe, or part of the KOALAS mythos, I guess is the new name for it. But it's an audiobook, a story I wrote focusing on Optimus Primal in the KOALAS mythos universe. And I mentioned that he's he's techno-organic. What techno-organic means is you have a mix of, in this particular case, Cybertronian and organic with you. Techno, Cybertronian, and organic with the organic matter. Because this is an Optimus Primal that was taken from the Beast Wars, so he has scanned a gorilla form, so he does have that organic matter, thereby techno-organic. This rando, this reoccurring rando, comes at me on my Twitter feed. Like, he doesn't even comment on the video. He directly approaches me on Twitter over the thing I talked about in the audiobook, and asks why. He asks why I called him techno-organic when the picture I used in the video is not techno-organic. So there are two assumptions here. The assumption is, one, the picture in the video is a true-to-life canon representation of what's going on in the KOALAS mythos. It isn't. I've used several pictures to try to generally represent something that happens in the story, but obviously isn't exactly what's going on in the story because it's art meant for something completely different, because I'm not an artist. I'm working on it. I've been working on my pen and tablet skills lately, but I have not reached the point where I can draw my own scenes from the KOALAS mythos and not take them seriously. It's hard to take them seriously when I draw the way I do. So that's on that assumption, as if I didn't just Google Optimus Primal on Google Images and use the first picture that came up. So that was a weird thing to assume first. And the second assumption is, the second thing is that picture of Optimus Primal with his gorilla kibble bits peeking out, isn't techno-organic. Like, you seem to be very insistent that wasn't techno-organic. Fool, it's a robot mixed with a gorilla. It's technological and organic. Techno-organic. Are you retarded? Are you retarded? Or do you think I'm retarded? Because someone has to be retarded in this scenario for you to just say things that are so wrong. I'm legitimately taking a moment to cool down just for a second because I don't want to get too loud. But he just kept insisting. He kept talking about that. And also there's another assumption here that he's going off by, like, he seems very, like, insistent that this is not techno-organic. Okay, let's say I used a picture of a non-techno-organic Optimus Primal, which would be what? When they repainted Transformer Cybertron Crumplezone's body in the Beast Wars prequel comics. Let's say I did use that picture, and he's very insistent. If I say it's techno-organic in the KOALAS mythos, it's techno-organic. That's how writing works. That's how world building works. The writer establishes the universe. The world builder builds the world. The KOALAS mythos does not go by the Transformer rules. Generally it does, but it doesn't have to. But he was very insistent, so, like, when he came at me with that tweet, I'm like, what are you talking about? This is the KOALAS mythos. And then he was just like, oh, so you're just gonna can I even find it? I blocked him on Twitter, so I can't find the tweets anymore. But he just, like, gave me a snarky response in response. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was just so brain dead. Now, going back to what I was originally talking about with my video on my 13 unpopular Transformers opinions being shared on Twitter, it was the Weird Optimus Primal profile pic dude. So I click on it, and all it is he's adding a Twitter account called TF Takes or something. I think it's run by Paperplane, who's a popular Transformers YouTuber. I haven't really watched any of his stuff, but I know he's a respected member of the community, Paperplane. And but he tweets it at Transformer Takes, and it's just a tweet at TF Takes and then a link to my video. No further elaboration, just sending my 13 unpopular Transformer opinions video to an account that basically tweets it. That account screenshots problematic or insensitive comments in the Transformers community. Mostly regarding sexism and stuff like that. So he takes screenshots of these sexist and problematic comments made by people in the Transformers community and just tweets it out on TF Takes. So, I've got a few things to say about that. One, I kind of want to say how dare you, but whatever. That's not what I should say. I guess one, where do I even start here? Nowhere in my opinions in my 13 unpopular Transformers opinion video did I say anything that would warrant being put on TF Takes. I didn't just all of a sudden attack women, you know. I said Transformers Energon was good. I don't know how that equates to hating women. Although, knowing the Transformers fan base, they would probably equate it to that. So he definitely misses the point of both my video and the purpose of that Twitter account. But, also, nice of you to talk to me about stuff that wastes my time, and then just don't talk to me about any issues you have with me, although I don't really expect that. This is just me thinking, just me off the cuff. But, to report me directly to the Twitter police of TF takes. Right. And yet, spending time trying to engage in a conversation with me, despite being fairly hostile. Yeah, I've already mentioned it. I blocked him. Just the moment I saw it, like, oh, let's just block this dude. I do not want to hear from this dude ever again. Now, I do think he's autistic. And I don't mean that in a meme way. I didn't say mean way, I said meme way, just so we're clear. But I don't mean that in a meme way. I think he's legitimately autistic. There are a lot of autistic people on my channel who come here purely for the Transformers stuff. Now here's the thing, I don't really know how to deal with autistic people. I just don't. Maybe it's a sort of autism in me where I like things to be normal. But autistic people, and it really depends on the spectrum. But once you pass a certain point on the spectrum, I don't know how to deal with you because your very existence and how you see the world just conflicts so heavily with my own how I see the world. And I'm very much a person who I value people based on how similar we can, or how much I respect their thinking process and how they view the world through their thinking process. So I guess saying I don't do well with autistic people isn't exactly true. It's once you're past a certain spectrum. Some of the people I respect the most are on the autism spectrum, but not past a certain point. Once you get past a certain point, it's very hard for me to deal with you. And I was doing a live stream recently, and like the only person in the chat was an autistic person, and I felt that I really couldn't have a proper conversation with chat when it was just one autistic person. If it was a normal person, if it was a person who thought things the way I did, then it would probably have gone better. But autistic people just see things through completely different lenses. They talk in a way that just doesn't jive well with how I see people, and I want to be clear that I don't hate autistic people on the virtue of them being autistic. Here's what it comes down to. I look at and treat autistic people just like I would anybody else, because there has been the push since forever for autistic people to not be discriminated against, to be treated just like any other person. So I treat them just like any other person. I won't condescend, I won't patronize isn't the word. Is patronize the word where you like treat people like they're children? Because I think patronize also means like to like give money to an artist. Hold on, I don't remember English. Patronize definition. Patronize, treat in a way. Oh, it's a homonym. But yeah, I won't patronize autistic people in the sense that that I'll treat them like they're kids. How I'll treat a retarded person, I generally will patronize them, not in a mean-spirited way, but in a way as in, like, I understand that this person is retarded, and that I need to, like, Did you hear that cat out there? That was ridiculous. The cats are going to start yelling outside now. This podcast is going off the rails. But with a retarded person, and I know retarded isn't the correct word for it, but whatever. A retarded person, it's purely because I like saying the word. That's that's completely the only reason I'm using that word right now. But I will, take a different stance. Is that the word? Talk through a different voice. Sort of like look through a different viewpoint, only for talking and not seeing. But I'll treat them differently because I understand that they're on, a different, what's the word for it? It's very hard to talk about stuff like this without sounding like a jerk or sounding like you hate these people. I'm trying my best here, and I've never been the type of person to be careful with my words. So this is very difficult for me. But how do I want to say this? I will treat retarded people like they are retarded. That doesn't mean I'm going to be mean to them, because I've seen a lot of mean things done to retarded people over the years, and I don't really like to. You don't want to kick a person while they're down, you know. So you'll treat them differently, just like I won't expect a deaf person to hear me, you know. So you have to like adjust. Adjust is a better word for it. Adjust. I would adjust when talking to a retarded person. There's this huge push that, autism and retardation are two very different things. They don't work in the same way. Autistic people are just people who have a different way of thinking. Okay, I will treat you like a normal person because autism is normal, especially with the idea of the autism spectrum. Once you introduce the spectrum idea, then everyone is on the autism spectrum. So everyone has some varying degrees of autism to some extent. So I don't adjust myself when talking to autistic people. So that results in people further along on the spectrum of autism, me treating them pretty much the same way I'd treat a normie or something. People I can't relate to. I guess that's the problem. I can't relate to in any way, shape, or form, despite them being normal people. Like, I can't relate to a retarded person, but it's a different thing. It's different from autism. So I can't, the way I communicate, and again, this is probably some degree of the autism spectrum on me, where I just can't find a way to communicate with people like that. I don't do well with them whatsoever. This is actually a conversation I've had with Twisted Ambition once before in the privacy of a Discord chat. But now here I am talking about it on the Commander's Cabin podcast. Welcome, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the 3rd episode of the Commander's Cabin podcast. We're going to talk about the Commander's Cabin podcast and its nature later on, because you might be looking at my content recently and thinking, Radix, how is the Commander's Cabin podcast any different from the Radcave? And I have an answer for that. I finally discovered the identity I'm looking for between these two shows that I'll get into later. But back to autism. I feel like I'm a bad person for feeling this way about autism, but it doesn't come from a place of wanting to discriminate against them. This is purely from me treating them like I treat everyone else. I guess it's not that I hate them in particular. I don't hate them. That's a bad way to say that. It's not like here's what it comes down to. I hate everyone. It's very rare that I like a person. It's very rare that I look at a person and think, you're alright. That's very rare. Typically, I just hate people. You could say that's a problem with me, and I would accept that. Sure, that's my problem. So I treat autistic people the same way I treat everyone else, and sometimes the autism spectrum on someone just makes it, generally speaking, harder for me to think, oh, you're an alright person, than someone who is, I guess saying not on the autism spectrum isn't the way to say it. Someone who is completely on the opposite side of the less autistic side of the spectrum. If I wanted to, the other option is for me to treat them like they're retarded, which they're not retarded. That's not how that works. Likewise, I'm not going to discriminate against, I'm not going to be, hostile? I'm not going to be overly mean-spirited towards an autistic person any more than I would a normal person, just because they're autistic. For example, I wouldn't, like, if I'm just walking down the street, or let's say I'm working at a convenience store or something, and an autistic person comes in and tries to buy something, I'm not going to, try to deny them service. I'm not going to, try to, con them out of some money, or doing. I treat them just like a normal person, because ultimately that's probably the best way to go about it, I think. There are people on the autism spectrum who are, not... I guess autism really does manifest differently in different people. Some of my favorite people are a little bit autistic, have a little bit of the tism, you know what I'm saying? Have a little bit of the tism. But they tend to... I tend to actually do pretty well with people with, ADHD and ADD. I tend to get along with those sorts of people pretty well, as long as it's not too bad. Because there's definitely a connection between autism and ADD and ADHD, and the worst. It's hard to say if you have ADHD or ADD really bad, because then it starts to become synonymous with autism, I think. But I tend to do well with people with, a manageable, even if it's medicated. If it has to be medicated, that's fine. But I tend to do pretty fine with ADD and ADHD people. One of my best friends in college, not college, high school, Scarface has ADD and ADHD, or one of the two. And yeah, they tend to be just not like they tend to be a little bit off the normie spectrum, because I don't like normies. That's that's a pretty I know who would have thought Commander Radix doesn't like normies, but they tend to be just off the normie spectrum enough for me to like, hey, you seem like a person I can relate to. And I don't have ADHD or ADD. I do have a thing. It's not autism, it's not ADD or ADHD, and it's not retardation. I do have this thing that's very rare, although it's a genetic thing that comes from the East Asian DNA group. What it is it's a gene. It's a gene that makes, I think it's my frontal cortex. I'm not entirely sure, but it makes my frontal cortex work faster than the average person. That gene, I ascribe to being a huge part of why I am the way I am and my personality, because it does so much. I'm not even sure where to start. A lot of my language ability comes from the fact that I have that gene. A lot of my depression comes from the fact that I have that gene. A lot of how I absorb information and how I interpret the world comes from that gene. Simply put, it's not that I think faster, it's that my brain doesn't, it goes into hyperspeed. In some ways it can be argued that I think faster, but I don't think that's an accurate way to put it. But for now I'll say it like that, and then as I talk about it, maybe you'll get the nuance a little bit more. But I tend to think through different options faster, I guess. I guess it doesn't mean I'm going to get to the right conclusion when I'm thinking faster than the average person, but I will go through more options in a moment than the average person. I guess I'll start with the simplest ways how that gene affects me. I can't stop thinking. My brain is constantly thinking. I'm constantly thinking of something. I read a report that, that there are some people who just don't have the inner monologue. The voice inside your head, and I don't mean like in an insane way, but like the voice inside your head as far as it goes, as far as comprehension and thinking. The word coming to mind right now is kangaeru, which is a Japanese word, because there are several words to think in Japanese, and kangaeru is the one I'm looking for. I'm not sure which equivalent that is to English besides just thinking, but like pondering, that sort of thinking. But I don't stop thinking, and most people will have some sort of inner monologue, but they can also turn it off. They can just sit there and not think of anything. Most people will have, whenever they need it, the inner monologue, and wherever they don't, they can have some peace of mind. There are some people who just rarely have the inner monologue and are pretty much always just peace of mind. And then there's people like me with that gene, mostly found in East Asian populations, that the inner monologue just doesn't stop. I am always thinking. This is why, like, my family tend to go to sleep the moment... Well, I won't get into individual family members, but some members of my family, like, they hit the bed, within a few minutes, they're sleeping at night. They're tired, they just want to sleep. Other members of my family, including me, it takes about maybe 3 hours between getting into bed and actually falling asleep. Because the way you fall asleep is your muscles relaxing and like gradually letting go. Your brain is a muscle too. When you're thinking, the frontal cortex is moving. I'm not sure if frontal cortex is the correct part of the brain, but it's the area that controls like a little bit of comprehension, thinking, language, that stuff. But because mine just doesn't stop and I'm always thinking, it's a muscle that continues to move. When you like spend the night just thinking and thinking and thinking, you pretty much don't fall asleep. You pass out of your brain just not being able to take it anymore. I don't just sleep. I don't gradually let go. I like, okay, this looks about the time that I should go to bed, and then I go to bed and I'm just sitting there thinking about everything ever, forever and ever, for about 3 hours until my body just can't take it anymore. And then I essentially pass out. That's essentially how I go to sleep, basically how I've gone to sleep my entire life. So that results in some sort of insomnia. I can stay up for a long time. It's about... Once we get into, like... I don't really start to feel tired until the 3 a.m. mark. But, and it's not just a blue light thing, because, I'm in front of my computer all the time, but even disregarding blue light and stuff like that, when I was a kid, I would be up at ungodly hours making cuckoo comics and stuff like that, when I wasn't allowed to use any digital device. So, this gene also is part of my depression. It makes me think a lot, and it makes me go to some dark places, and really that's about all there is to say. Once, I didn't really used to be depressed until some incidents happened that gave me depression, and now I pretty much can't get rid of it because of the way my brain works. Like, it's like if you put like a little bit of poison in a blender that's always running, and like let's say you're making a smoothie and like, oops, I dropped poison, that blender can't stop and the poison is getting spread, and there's no way to get the poison out because that blender's going to keep moving, and that it's in the system, there's no way it can get out. That's sort of how my brain works with that. Ultimately, this gene also allows me to, once I hear information and I care enough about learning it, that information is going to stay with me. I was in, and this is going to sound like bragging territory, but I don't mean it to be, but I was in honors classes, AP classes, honor societies, my entire time in high school and stuff like that. And one thing that always was interesting to me was how everyone seemed to talk about studying, how they would go home and actually like open up their books and stuff and their notes and reread it. And that was like a ridiculous concept to me. Like, I have no idea what was going on with that. And people would be talking about how they would be spending hours studying and like being up into the middle of the night studying. And I'm like, why are you putting yourself through so much pain for something that doesn't actually matter? Because I'm convinced, well, I was convinced at that time that studying was like a meme. Like, it wasn't like a real thing people did. Like, it was like one of those things like gurus said would help you, like, sort of like a, like a scam. What's the one I'm looking for? But like something people say, oh, you do this and it will solve all your problems, and then like you go through all that work and it doesn't actually help, because studying didn't help me. If I wanted to know something, I would know it. If I didn't want to know if I didn't care, I wouldn't know it. So sitting there studying resulted in me not learning anything. It was a waste of time. But if I cared about something, was interested in learning something, basically all I needed to do was sit in class, listen to the teacher say something, and go, oh, really? Okay. And then pass the test perfectly fine. That's how I was through school. It was around college where I really discovered that, wait a minute. Discord's going off. You can probably hear the beeps. Let me do not disturb myself. Okay. But it was around college that I was looking at other family members who were like... There were other family members who made like a little bit better grades than me. There were other family members who were making really great grades, and they spent every single hour of their life outside of school studying. It was ridiculous. It looked miserable, but they were making good grades. And I was looking at that and I'm like, what's happening here? How is it that rereading your notes and rereading the book and all of that help you like get good grades? Why don't you just pay attention in class? And then that's when it was around this time where I also did the DNA test and got like information on my genes and started looking up what each gene actually did and what the different experiments have shown about that gene. And that's when I found the gene, and I'm like, oh, so that's why I seem to learn languages easier than everyone else. That's why I've never studied a day in my life, at least not by my family would force me to study when I was making bad grades, but those studying sessions made no difference. The bad grades I'm talking about are like in math, and I just have no care about math because I cannot connect math to the real world. So I have no interest in math. So I look at math and have no interest in it, which results in, and believe me, I would cry at the table being frustrated that I just couldn't get math. If it's not like I didn't want, like, if I had the option to, like, if there was like two buttons in front of me and one said do good in math and do bad in math, I would hit do good in math. Like, it's not like I'm not interested in doing good in math. I want to do good in math, but I just cannot bring myself to care. I wish I could. But with something that I could connect to the real world, like history, like science, like really history and science and languages, those stuff I did great in. And I never really studied them at all. I just sat in class, heard what the teacher said, and like, oh, okay, and then proceed to, that's just something I knew now. That was just like, I didn't have to review it or anything. I always held the philosophy in high school that if you just pay attention in class, you don't need to study. But I'm realizing that more and more people actually need to, like, sit down and study stuff in order to do, like, make good grades and stuff like that, which surprised me. But I'm starting to understand that a little bit better now. But yeah, throughout college, and my major was history and education, pretty much a majority of my classes were something Okay, here's the deal with college. The deal with college is I learned nothing in college. And that's not because, like, they were teaching me stuff and I just didn't learn it. It's because they were teaching me irrelevant stuff that didn't matter whatsoever. Let it be known that I am a huge anti-college person. I do not support the college system. I do not support going to college. It depends on what you want to be. I only recommend going to college if you're going into a profession where they, like, strictly look for a degree from college. But besides that, besides getting the credentials, there is no purpose to college. I do not support college. In many cases, I think it does more does more harm than good. I think college perpetuates this stigma against people who didn't go to college, and like, oh, you didn't go to college, you must be stupid. People equate being learned with going to college. They equate being smart with going to college, and that is incredibly incorrect. I do not support that whatsoever. But throughout college, I kind of already knew everything that was taught that was of importance, and everything else wasn't important. And I passed college, so, and I don't think I studied a day in my life in college. People talk about, oh, I spent, and to be fair, I also was majoring in history and education. But the other education majors and history majors did a lot more work outside of class than I did. And I still did pretty good. People would have to, like, review their notes and review the book and stuff. I just sat, listened, and then learned. I didn't have to study for any of that. So my college was a lot more chill, or my college experience was a lot more chill than most other people, even in the same major. Because, you know, history and education isn't like a nursing degree. But I still did more than the average history major, and I still did less than the average history major, average education major, average history and education major, with sometimes better results. But I do well in languages, generally speaking. Speaking because it's a language, yeah, get it. But I generally do well in languages, and like I would always talk about how, like, I would talk to my family and be like, hey, you guys should learn Japanese. You're part Japanese, it's part of your heritage, let's learn Japanese. And then they would get all angry, like, we don't absorb languages like you do. And I'm always like, I just put in the work to learn the language, you know. It's not about talent, it's about working for it. But then I discovered, no, I learn at a faster pace than the average person, even those people who've been studying the language for a long time. I absorb the language ridiculously fast. And then I'm looking at these genes, looking at how it affects my brain, and I'm looking at the part of the brain it affects, like, it also deals with language comprehension. I'm like, oh, of course it does. So, also, I used to take antidepressant medication a long time ago for my depression, and no antidepressant medicine worked. And I understand that, you know, it doesn't work for anyone, you know, period, but no medication worked for me. And then I'm looking at that gene, I'm looking at the frontal, I'm not entirely sure if it's the frontal cortex, but the part of the brain it impacted. And I'm also like, part of the experiment they've done on people with this gene is see if antidepressants work, and antidepressants don't work. Because the way antidepressants work isn't the same way I have, like, essentially what it comes down to is my depression has all the symptoms of depression while not having the same biological cause as most cases of depression. So antidepressants are attacking the biological symptoms of depression that just aren't present in me because my depression comes from same symptoms, entirely different source. Now, I believe this gene is also associated with ADD and ADHD, but I do not have those. I do not need medication for any of that. I don't have ADHD or anything. I do have it in my family, but I myself don't have it. So if any of you have been like watching my videos and wondering like, this dude seems like he has a little bit of autism, the fact of the matter is I don't, but I do have this frontal cortex thing, which essentially makes me think faster. I hate saying it like that because that's not true. But it creates some things like me obsessing over continuity, let's say. Continuity in Transformers, me obsessing over history details. That seems a little autistic, but when it comes down to it, when an autistic person is obsessive about something, they do it to like an unhealthy amount, and it's very hard for them to be obsessive about more than just one thing or two things. Mine is just how I think and how I see the world and how I categorize things in my head. So I can be like, I can pay attention to the details for a lot of stuff. I enjoy content through paying attention to the details and the little obscure, trivial knowledge. And it's not exactly the same thing as an autistic person being obsessive about, say, train facts or something like that. I don't mean that stereotypically. There are a lot of autistic people who like trains. Trains, for some reason, is something that draws them. But they also be obsessive about things like My Little Pony or Transformers, and I think that's why I get a lot of autistic people in the Transformers fan base coming to my channel, which is unfortunate because the way I see the world makes me very hard to deal with autistic people. I really hope this podcast doesn't come off as like some sort of ableist, anti-autistic, anti-retarded people podcast, because let me promise you it's not my intention. This is just me trying to explain something. I really hope this doesn't get a big backlash. I hope people can understand this, understand where I'm coming from or how I'm explaining this. But then again, I don't have a good track record of me trying to explain something and people getting the point. I know I've talked about that a lot of times. So, I'm just going to brace for the worst for this podcast, but whatever. So I want to talk about the difference between the Commander's Cabin podcast, the podcast you are currently listening to right now, which, by the way, thank you so much for listening to the Commander's Cabin podcast. I consider the Commander's Cabin podcast, how many times am I going to say that? I consider this podcast to be part of the core Commander Radix videos set. I consider hashtag true Commander Radix fans to be the type of people to listen to the Commander's Cabin podcast. As big as my subscriber count is, I only consider my fan base to be as big as the view count for, Commander Cabin podcast videos. That's what I consider my true, deep lore fan base. And I really appreciate each and every one of you who join me on these interesting adventures that we call, this Ponzi scheme I call a podcast. But I've expressed my issues on Twitter and maybe in the Radcave, I can't remember, that the Radcave and Commander's Cabin really have the same exact thing. They're just me talking about events in my life and things that I think and feel. So I've had the issue, that's why there hasn't been a Commander's Cabin recently, with me trying to figure out what is the identity of Commander's Cabin in contrast to the Radcave. And I know there has to be something, because I can look at an idea and think, that's a Radcave segment, or that's a Commander's Cabin segment. And sometimes they overlap, but there are some things that I look at and say, that's definitely a Cabin segment, or that's definitely a Radcave segment, that I can't really do on the other platform. So I'm like, there's something different between these two, and I gotta figure out what that is. And I think I figured out at least one element to it, and that is The Radcave is just me telling the Radcave is me on a journey to find my true house, the house I will settle in, and like the hardships I face along the way. The commander's cabin is this nice, chill atmosphere. Like there's some nice jazz music in the background, and you have a nice aesthetic GIF playing. But at the same time, there's a little bit of that ludonarrative dissonance with me just going off the rails complaining about something that pisses me off or has pissed me off lately. So it's a ridiculous juxtaposition between these two things that contradict each other. But it's a lot of me just ranting and raving, excuse me, about how I just do not like this world I find myself in. And just, the things that piss me off on a daily basis. Now, it's not necessarily always that. I think the first Commander's Cabin episode had me talking about like the nature of my content. I think Commander's Cabin is a good place for me to explain myself and explain some thoughts I've had for a long time. But ultimately, I think the best portions of this podcast is when I'm angry at something. I think that's where it really shines. I don't think it does well when I talk about my own content, or like try to do I don't think it does well when I'm trying to do a systematic like piece by piece breakdown of something. Like I don't like listening through the podcast when I was talking about like each video I had put out recently as part of my initiative to do YouTube more on a more regular basis. I didn't really like re-listening to that, but I do like listening to me tearing comments apart. So I think I should be getting better at this podcast as time goes on. But yeah, complaining about stuff, I guess it's a venting source if you think about it. It's really maybe not being angry at stuff, but venting about stuff that bothers me. That might be a better way to put it. The Commander's Cabin is a good place for me to sit down to some chill music, even though I'm not listening to the music. The music's added in post, with a chilled GIF that I can't see because that's added in post. But it's just me venting, because sometimes you just need a place to vent, And what better way to do it than on a podcast, which every millennial has done a podcast at some point. I don't consider myself a millennial. I think I'm running out of space of how much I want to talk about what makes the Commander's Cabin podcast different from the Radcave. They're very similar, and from afar, they look the same, but when you really squint and really get down into the trenches, you'll realize that the Commander's Cabin podcast has a different identity. It's a different person. Take like two friends who are like really close, but like the more you get to know them, the more you realize that there are some things that are different about them and that make them their own different people. That's what the Radcave and Commander's Cabin are right now. Let's talk about the millennials. That's fine. Fine, that's fun. Feel free to type "Okay, Boomer" in the comments below, even though I put myself on the opposite end of the millennials. Generations aren't really clearly defined. People will say, oh, boomers are from 19 whatever to 1964 whatever. And like millennials are born 19 whatever to 1990 whatever. Or even to 2000 I've seen. There is a wide range of years for millennials, which I think defining millennials in and of themselves is pretty hard to do, especially when millennials are defined by the internet and the role in their lives. Or technology and the role of their lives. But I think the internet is a bigger deal than just technology. But inside the group that's considered millennials by some people, includes people who were in college when the internet got big, people who were in high school when the internet got big, people who were in middle school when the internet got big, people who were in elementary school when the internet got big, and people who haven't even entered school when the internet got big. And I think when the internet comes into your life, marks very different sorts of people. I think inside the millennial generation is a huge variety of people that I would define as when the internet came into their lives. Then you see the variety as, say, like the 1950 to 1964 baby boomer generation and stuff like that. The internet is a revolutionary thing. And I think when that came into your life and how much like you speak the internet as a second language really, or as a native language, and by speaking I don't mean like slang, but like internet literacy, like being able to use the internet, being able to like know how to X out a window, or being able to recognize that I shouldn't click that ad, that's going to give me a virus, or I should probably do a pop-up blocker here, or I don't think I'll download from that site. This site seems more safer, and you don't know exactly how to define how like torrenting a video game from one site is safer than the other, but you just have that feel that you're like in your native language, like this one feels a bit more safer, is not going to get me a virus or get me notified by the FBI. I don't know how to explain that besides internet literacy. But internet literacy, just like when you're a baby and you have languages spoken around you, the earlier that language is introduced to you, the better you're going to be able to speak that language. The earlier the internet becomes a big thing in your life, the better you're going to be able to use it, or more literate you're going to be in the internet. And the internet is life-changing. And the way you use the internet can be very different from how other people use the internet. So I think the millennial generation has a lot of variety in it based on when the internet came into your life, and I don't really think millennials is a good term for people born in those years. Now, I was born in 1997. Some people will stick that in the millennial category. Some people will stick that in the, what is it, Gen Z? Is that what it is? Or Gen Y? What's Gen Y? Gen Y. Oh, Gen Y is millennials. Gen Z? Gen Z are... Demographers and researchers typically use the mid to late 90s as starting birth years, while consensus has not been reached on ending birth years. But yeah, these generations aren't clearly defined. There isn't a consensus. But I don't think of myself as a millennial. I remember one time, like, I was tweeting something like an anti-millennial tweet, and then Daniel Adkins said, "But you're a millennial." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I think me and Daniel Adkins were born like in the same year, or about the same amount. Like, we're in the same generation. And he looks at himself as a millennial. I absolutely do not. But I don't know if I consider myself Gen Z either. When I think of Gen Z, I think of someone a little bit younger. But I think of someone born in like 2000 and earlier as Gen Z. But I was born in 1997, and 1997 is a really weird zone for people who were born, because some demographers put it in the tail end of millennials, some put it in early Generation Z. And like, generations... Alright, let's break it down. Generations are social constructs. We use the social construct word, but generations aren't real. Generations are literally memes that are just made up concepts that are spread around, and you're like, alright, let's go with this. I think eras, like dividing time periods into eras, is a more accurate way of dividing people than generations. But 1997 is a weird generation, but I don't really consider myself a millennial, especially when you look at what millennials have in common, or at least what they say they have in common. I really don't have in common with. Let's be clear, when I think millennial, I think of hipster in Los Angeles, at Starbucks, kind of has a beard, but it's less of a beard and more of unshaven, probably wearing a beanie, probably wearing thick rim glasses, which, I'm wearing thick rim glasses, but whatever. Let's ignore that my aesthetic is dangerously similar to that hipster millennial aesthetic. It's just mine just feels like it has a bit more pessimism, but less mean-spiritedness? Is that the word I want to use? I don't know. More lighthearted? Like, I feel like the stereotype of a millennial is like they have that aesthetic, but they're also just like bitter at everything around them and like looking to point out when things are problematic. My aesthetic is very similar, but at the same time, like, I have this philosophy that everything's messed up, the world's going to end soon. May as well make fun of everything before I die. May as well make the most of it, having fun, than just being bitter and like, trying to like avoid social taboos or something. And by social taboos, I mean like saying retarded. It's all coming full circle, isn't it? But yeah. Yeah, when I think millennials, I think of, you shouldn't make racist jokes because the world's terrible, we need to make it better. And I'm like, may as well make racist jokes, because if we can't laugh at it, what's the point? It's gonna be there anyway. I do have that similar aesthetic of, like, you could easily see me sitting in some sort of coffee shop, drinking coffee despite the fact that I don't drink coffee, working on some sort of manuscript for a writing piece I'm working on, listening to some sort of indie music on Spotify. Just recently discovered Spotify, by the way. I've always said that I do not understand Spotify. Like, I don't understand the purpose of it. I always thought, like, why not just use YouTube? It has pretty much all the music on YouTube. But now I've started to use Spotify a little bit more. I've discovered, what is it, MXM Tunes, I think her name is this Chinese American or Chinese Canadian woman who, like, got famous with the ukulele, who's very soothing. I like listening to her music that I discovered on Spotify. But I definitely have that millennial hipster aesthetic in that aura around me. But at the same time, not the same. The philosophy is completely different, which ultimately it comes down to philosophy, which is why I don't consider myself a millennial. We can get into other stuff that I don't consider myself a millennial, but like, millennials view their communities differently than I do. A lot of millennials, at least to the stereotype, see other millennials and like, yeah, we're millennials, we gotta stick together. I stay at my home all day. I don't want to be bothered by anyone. And if any millennial goes like, we're millennials, man, we gotta stand up to the boomers, I'm just gonna look at them like they're retarded. like I have nothing to do with you, and I will never have anything to do with you. I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want to have anything to do with people. I guess that's maybe why I reject the generation terms, because I reject being grouped in with other people. I just want to sit at my home working on my crafts all day. And I talked about this a little bit in the Radcave, about how I'm really coming to terms with being an introvert, and like I'm starting to understand that staying at home all day is a dream to me. And if all of a sudden a genie popped out of nowhere and said, you get to live how you're living forever, except you won't have to pay for like rent or anything, or food or anything. Food will just magically appear. You won't have to pay rent or electricity or anything like that. You'll just live in this one box apartment forever, but you can't leave. I'd be completely chill with that. I would be happy. And especially in Japan, there's this mindset of people who like stay in their room all day are like wasting their lives and stuff like that. But I view talking with people a waste of my time. Like, obviously not with friends. Like, take for example the lazy koalas. The lazy koalas are one of the few people out there whose presence, whose company I enjoy, and whose company I will actively seek out. Even my like best friends in high school, I haven't talked to in forever. Just because we were friends in high school, because we were in high school. I kind of had to band together. But like the lazy koalas, I actively sought out, made friends with, and decided to stay. The koalas, the only people I'll actively seek out their company, and we're all online. We're all online. We're all online. It's not like a real life thing. Well, it is real life, but not in like face-to-face thing. But I like the internet thing because I can keep my distance on the internet. I don't have to feel like I'm getting my energy drained on the internet. And people look at it as like that's a waste of your life. And I don't look at it as a waste of my life at all. I look at talking with other people a waste of my life. Going outside a waste of my life. Having to sleep and meet a work schedule as a waste of my life. So I'm starting to come to terms with that more. And I guess I've really like clicked into the whole lone wolf type persona. I'm perfectly fine with being that, lone wolf. Lone wolf sounds so edgy. Is there a better word for it? I don't know. I'll use lone wolf, but that just sounds so edgy. But I'm fine with that lone wolf stuff. I will try to be lone wolf as long as possible. Ultimately, I guess the whole point of doing YouTube was trying to find a way to make myself understood, because I feel that I'm never understood by anyone completely. It's sort of like a little bit of the hedgehog's dilemma, where basically it's impossible to understand anyone, like to a perfect degree. And for someone like me who values being understood, that puts me in a very unfortunate world. But I'm okay with just, you know, sending out these signals via the internet of me trying to be understood, while not actually having to face someone and trying to have that individual understand me. And I'm coming to terms with this world will never understand me, and I don't want to be like some sort of, oh, you don't understand me. I'm not trying to be some sort of emo person like that. But it's just a fact of the matter that no one will ever understand you. So I'm coming to terms with that, you know, sort of detaching myself from people who I've been attached to that I realize I shouldn't have been attached to, which has resulted in a huge loss. Like, my depression is, like, gradually, like, I don't know if cured's the right word, but it's becoming less of a problem. Definitely less of a problem. Huge less of a problem. Like, I always get asked here, like, don't you feel homesick or don't you feel lonely? And, like, I'm feeling great. Like, a lot of my time in America, and it has nothing to do with my life in America, really. It pretty much just has to do with, like, high school stuff and stuff that went down in high school and a little bit into college. But, it was a huge source of, like, my depression, and now that's gone, and I'm, like, psychologically come to terms with everything. I've been feeling great. I have been concerned, though, because, like, I know you shouldn't say, like, depression helps creativity, but in my case, depression did help with my creativity. I am concerned with my creativity going down, because my depression is going down. And I'm like, oh no, if I lose my depression, where is my drive to create art? Let me just put on my beret and my French shirt and French bread. Yeah, let me put on my French bread. My English is dying. But yeah, things are going great as I'm coming to terms with who I am and where I fit into everything. This time in Japan has been a huge identity revolution for me, especially seeing how I'm treated by other people compared to how I was treated in America. It's just very interesting. But yeah, things are going great. I don't know how long this podcast is going to be. To be clear, I'm trying to get over the hour mark, but I don't think any podcast has reached that length yet. So all these Commander's Cabin podcasts have been fairly on the short side. But I think I'm tired right now. I think that's all I have to say. I know I should probably record these in segments, like with separate pieces of time, because it's clearly designed to be two different, like, you can see where there are pauses and where I move on to a completely different subject. That could easily have been a different day of recording, but for some reason I have this compulsion to record everything in one go and get things as finished as fast as possible. I don't know why. But I should probably record these in segments, but we're going to end this here. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Commander's Cabin podcast, the only podcast on YouTube. Follow me on social media. All my links are in the description, although odds are, if you're listening to this, you already know the drill. You're subscribed, you're following me on social media. You probably know that the KOALAS Mythos exists and that there's a website for it, link in the description. You're probably in the Discord server. Thank you very much. I consider the viewership of the Commander's Cabin to be really the core audience. You guys are the guys I try to cater towards. You guys are the guys that I don't want to lose, you know? Because, like, a huge chunk of my fan base are for the Transformers stuff, but there will always be Transformer fans. If I lose them, boo-hoo. But if you're here for, like, some of the stuff that's unique to Commander Radix, you're a rare commodity, and I am very grateful for your continued support. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day, ladies and gentlemen.